cheating wife said, "Where I go is none of your business." What he did next crushed her. "Where I go is none of your business." Those were the last words Evelyn Ellison hurled at her husband before slamming the door and stepping into the night, dressed to impress another man. She had no idea that the man she dismissed so easily was already 3 steps ahead of her. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about love, marriage, betrayal, and cold revenge. Viewers, what would you do if someone you loved looked you in the eye and told you that your place in their world was none of your business? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The whiskey glass caught the dim light, amber liquid swirling as Mark's hand stilled midair. Across the hall, Evelyn stood before the mirror, fastening her earrings with deliberate care. Her silk dress shimmered, the scent of perfume filling the room with an unfamiliar sharpness. Mark's eyes lingered on her. "Where are you going dressed like that?" His tone was calm, but beneath it, something coiled tight. Evelyn's head turned slowly, and for a moment, he thought she might soften, might smile like she used to. Instead, her lips curled. "Where I go is none of your business." The words landed like a thunderclap. She had never spoken to him that way before, not once in all their years together. He sat frozen as she snatched her clutch, heels clicking against the floorboards. The door slammed, and silence rushed in behind her. Mark blinked, his mind replaying the line. None of your business. The same woman who once whispered that she couldn't breathe without him, who clung to him during their wedding vows, now spoke as if he were a stranger standing in her way. He pressed the glass to his lips, but the whiskey burned too bitter to swallow. His thoughts shifted, sharp and fast. She was dressed too elegantly for an innocent outing, makeup layered with precision, hair styled in ways she never bothered with for him anymore. A cold realization sank into his bones. Mark pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts, hesitating. The name wasn't one he had used before. 2 years ago, during a firm's end-of-year gala, he had met a private investigator. Henderson. They had shared a brief conversation over cigars about corporate fraud cases. Henderson had pressed his card into Mark's hand with a chuckle. "You never know when you might need me. Husbands, businessmen, trouble finds us all." Mark had almost tossed the card that night. But something, instinct, fate, or maybe a whisper of Evelyn's restlessness even back then, made him save the number. He had never called it. Until now. He tapped the screen. The line clicked. "Henderson speaking." The voice was brisk, professional. Mark steadied his breathing. "This is Mark Ellison. We met at the Chamber of Commerce Gala 2 years ago. You gave me your card." A pause, then a faint chuckle of recognition. "Ah, yes. I remember. What can I do for you, Mr. Ellison?" Mark's jaw clenched. He stared at the door his wife had just stormed through. "I need you to follow my wife. Tonight. I want to know where she goes, who she meets, everything." There was no surprise in Henderson's reply, only efficiency. "Send me her photo and her phone number. Consider it handled." When the call ended, Mark set the phone down. He closed his eyes, recalling their early years, Evelyn laughing as they painted their first apartment, promising him forever even if they had nothing. But that promise had already crumbled. Tonight wasn't about suspicion anymore. Tonight was about truth. The wind rattled the windows as if the house itself sensed the storm about to break. Morning light stretched across the room, the other side of the bed cold, untouched. Mark lay on his back, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan as it turned lazily above him. He hadn't really slept. Every creak of the house had reminded him of the silence Evelyn left behind. The phone buzzed on his nightstand. He reached for it with a hand that felt heavier than stone. Henderson's name glowed on the screen. "Mr. Ellison?" The investigator's voice was brisk but not unkind. "You were right to call me." Mark's throat tightened. "Tell me." She met a man, older, wealthy, the type who doesn't check price tags. They dined at Leclerc. I caught photos, her hand brushing his, champagne glasses clinking. After dinner, they drove to the Windsor Hotel. I've already sent everything to your email. Mark closed his eyes briefly. Good. Send me the full report for legal use. Understood. You'll have it before noon. The call ended, leaving only the steady tick of the clock on the wall. For a long moment Mark sat there, phone resting on his thigh, staring into the stillness of the house. He thought of Evelyn in that silk dress, laughing across a candle-lit table at another man. His chest ached, but not with rage. What filled him instead was a chilling clarity. The ding of his inbox broke the silence. He opened Henderson's email. Photos bloomed across the screen. Evelyn stepping gracefully out of a car, her smile radiant. Evelyn leaning close to a man with silvered hair and a predator's grin. Evelyn disappearing into the hotel lobby with his hand guiding her lower back like he had claimed her. Mark exhaled slowly. No shouting. No glass shattered against the wall. Only the cold resolve of a man watching the last illusion of love dissolve. He scrolled one more time, then dialed another number. A locksmith's card he had tucked away a year earlier after a break-in scare down the street. Evelyn had laughed when he suggested upgrading their locks. Who would bother robbing us? She'd teased, dismissive. But Mark had saved the card anyway, quietly, the way men save an umbrella on a dry day. Morning service? The locksmith answered. Yes, Mark replied, voice steady. Every lock in the house replaced. Front, back, side doors, everything. Today. We can be there by 9. I'll be waiting. When the call ended, Mark rose from the bed with deliberate calm. He opened the closet, tugged out Evelyn's matching suitcases, and laid them open on the floor. Each piece of clothing he folded carefully, almost reverently. Dresses she once wore when they danced at friends' weddings, shoes he had bought for her birthday, silk blouses that still smelled faintly of her perfume. But as he placed them into the suitcase, each item became another stone sealing a tomb. By the time the last zipper closed, the man who had once loved her beyond reason was gone. In his place stood someone colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. The chime of the doorbell echoed through the still house at precisely 9 o'clock. Mark opened the door to find a stocky man in overalls, toolbox in hand. His van idled in the driveway, the logo Quick Secure Locksmiths painted in fading letters on the side. You Ellison? The man asked. Mark nodded. Come in, change everything. Front door, back door, the side entry, even the garage. The locksmith whistled softly as he surveyed the locks. Must have had a scare. Mark's lips curved faintly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. As the man set to work, the sound of drills and clinking metal filled the air. Mark moved methodically through the house, zipping the last suitcase, stacking them neatly by the door. Evelyn's life reduced to luggage lined in a row. He paused over her vanity table, fingers brushing across scattered makeup compacts and perfume bottles. For a moment, he remembered the young woman who once dabbed perfume on her wrists and asked him nervously, "Do you think I'm beautiful enough for you?" He had pulled her close that night, swearing she was more than he deserved. Now, staring at those same bottles, he felt only the sting of irony. By 10, the locksmith straightened with a satisfied nod. All done. New keys, new codes. No one's getting in without your say-so. He handed Mark a small ring of keys. Mark took them, the metal biting cold into his palm. Thank you. The man packed his tools, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the walls he had just fortified. When the van pulled away, Mark opened the front door and slid Evelyn's suitcases neatly onto the porch. He placed them with deliberate care, as if arranging evidence for a jury. Then he stood in the doorway, looking at the packed bags under the gray morning light. It felt final. He locked the door with one of the new keys, testing it with a quiet click. The sound was sharp, decisive. He slipped the rest of the keys into his pocket, his jaw tightening. Mark grabbed a smaller duffel from the bedroom. Just a few changes of clothes, his laptop, the documents he couldn't afford to lose. He carried it to his car, parked discreetly down the street. As he walked, Neighbors waved from across their lawns, oblivious to the drama unfolding. He waved back, his face composed, the picture of calm. But inside, a darker resolve pulsed. He would not confront Evelyn with shouting or accusations. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing his pain. He would strip from her everything she thought untouchable, her comfort, her security, her dignity. Piece by piece, he would make her watch her fantasy crumble until nothing remained but regret. At 10:15, Mark drove to Daniel's apartment across town. His old friend opened the door, brows furrowed. "You look like hell." Mark handed him the duffel and said simply, "I need a place for a few days." Daniel didn't press, only nodded. But Mark's silence, the steel in his eyes, spoke volumes. By noon, his phone buzzed again. Henderson's report had arrived. Detailed, comprehensive, undeniable. Mark downloaded the file, his lips pressing into a thin line. The chessboard was set. Daniel's apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Mark sat at the kitchen table, Henderson's report open on his phone. Photos of Evelyn with the man flicked across the screen, her smile, her hand on his sleeve, the hotel entrance swallowing them both. Daniel leaned against the counter, arms folded. "So it's true." Mark didn't answer. He tapped the screen once more, then forwarded the files to a private email Evelyn had never known. The same folder also held their prenuptial agreement, proof that she'd never touch what wasn't hers. "You gonna confront her?" Daniel asked. "No," Mark said evenly. "I'm going to take everything she thinks she can fall back on." His tone carried no heat, only certainty. He remembered the day they signed that prenup, Evelyn laughing at the seriousness of it, teasing, "We'll never need this." At the time he'd thought so too. Now, the document was a weapon. A notification buzzed. Henderson again. Full file ready for legal use. Hotel confirmed overnight stay. Mark slipped the phone into his pocket, the decision already set. "Lawyer?" Daniel asked. "After the bank," Mark said. Daniel raised a brow. "She doesn't have access to your account, does she?" "Yes, she does." Mark's voice hardened. "I'm not leaving a cent for her to touch." He stood, picked up a slim folder containing IDs, account details, and walked to the door. Daniel didn't follow, but his voice stopped him for a second. "This won't be clean, Mark. Once you start, there's no pause button." Mark looked back. "That's the point." He left without another word. In his chest, there was no storm, no shaking hands. Only the cold rhythm of a man moving piece by piece through a plan he already knew by heart. Mark checked his watch. He had time to get to the bank before she ever thought of coming home. The bank lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and disinfectant, the kind of sterile calm that gave nothing away. Mark pushed through the glass doors with the same steady pace he'd carried all morning. No hurry, no panic, just the weight of inevitability. A young woman greeted him with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" Mark set his folder on the counter and opened it with practiced precision. "I want to transfer all funds from this account to a new one in my name only, then close every linked access. Permanently." The woman blinked, unused to such blunt requests, but nodded quickly. "Of course. May I see your ID?" He slid it across, watching her fingers dance over the keyboard. Numbers flashed across the screen, balances that Evelyn would never see again. "Do you want the transfer internal or to another branch?" she asked. "Another branch," Mark replied. He had already opened the Shell account online that morning, under an email address she never knew existed. As she typed, his mind replayed Evelyn's voice from years earlier when she'd persuaded him to let her manage some of the household finances. "You trust me, don't you?" she'd asked, smiling. He had trusted her completely. Now that trust was ashes, and she would discover just how final betrayal could feel. The woman slid papers across the counter. "Please sign here, sir. This will remove any previous secondary access and make the new account strictly under your control." Mark signed, his pen stroke calm, final. Will you need a cashier's check or card today? Both, he said. Issue them now. Within minutes, she handed him a new envelope. Account details, card, documents. Mark tucked it neatly into his folder, the way a surgeon might place instruments back into their case after a finished operation. As he turned to leave, he paused at the desk. One more thing. Can you flag this transfer so any attempts to reverse it will be blocked? She hesitated. That's automatic once the wire clears. Good, Mark said, and walked out. Outside, the late afternoon sun had begun its slow descent. He checked his watch. Nearly 4. Mark slipped into his car and sat for a moment, the new bank folder on the passenger seat. For the first time since last night, he allowed himself a thin smile. He started the engine and dialed Daniel. Bank's done. Now the lawyer. Daniel's reply was short. I'll meet you there. Mark pulled into traffic, merging smoothly as if nothing in his life had shifted. But in truth, everything had. By the time Evelyn returned home at 5, she would find her clothes on the porch, her cards empty, her calls unanswered. At exactly 5:03 p.m., Evelyn's heels clicked briskly against the sidewalk as she stepped out of a sleek black car. The driver held the door, but she barely noticed, still basking in the afterglow of a day spent in satin sheets and expensive wine. She hummed softly as she walked through the gate, her eyes fixed on the familiar porch. Then she stopped. 4 suitcases sat neatly lined along the front step, like unwanted parcels. The sight knocked the smile from her face. For a moment she simply stared, her brain scrambling for an explanation. No, she muttered, rushing forward. She pulled her key from her purse and jammed it into the lock. It turned halfway, then stuck. She tried again, twisting harder. Nothing. She pounded on the door. Mark, open the door. Silence. Her pulse spiked. She yanked her phone from her purse and dialed his number. Straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. Each time the call fell into the same cold recording. Breathing hard, she called Daniel. It rang twice before disconnecting. She called another friend. Oh, Evie, I'm so sorry, I can't tonight. I have family in town. Another excuse. Another voice pulling away. Her stomach knotted as she scrolled frantically through her contacts. She dialed her lover's number, desperate for the sound of his voice. The call connected. A woman answered. Who is this? The tone was sharp, possessive. Evelyn froze. Her lips parted, but no words came. The line went dead. The world around her suddenly felt too loud. The hum of a neighbor's lawnmower, children laughing on bicycles, the faint whisper of someone across the street saying, Is that her? She realized then how exposed she was, standing on the porch with her luggage like a runaway who had nowhere to run. Her hand shook as she tried the lock one more time, but the metal resisted. The home she thought was hers had rejected her, its doors sealed against her touch. Mark, she screamed, fists pounding against the wood. You can't do this to me. You hear me? You can't. But the house remained mute, its windows reflecting her panic back at her. Tears stung her eyes as she fumbled for her credit card. Fine, she whispered, voice cracking. Hotel. I'll go to a hotel. She flagged another car and threw herself inside, barking the address to the nearest luxury suite. But when the receptionist swiped her card, the machine beeped a sharp denial. Insufficient funds, the woman said politely, though her eyes flicked with curiosity. That's not possible, Evelyn snapped, sliding another card across. Another denial. And another. Each decline chipped away at the facade she clung to. By the third, the receptionist's polite smile had hardened into pity. Evelyn's throat closed. Humiliation wrapped around her like a noose. She grabbed her bags, muttering, I'll handle it, and stormed out before the eyes at the desk could burn her further. She had only one option left. Home. Her parents' house. And as she climbed into the car again, the first sob broke free, muffled against her hand. She didn't know what awaited her there. She didn't know the next blow was already on its way. But she knew this much. Mark had started a war, and she had walked into it blind. The night air was thick with silence as Evelyn dragged her suitcases up the narrow path to her parents' front porch. Each wheel rattled against the cracked stone, loud enough to wake half the neighborhood. She hesitated at the door, smoothing her hair, wiping her cheeks with trembling fingers. Her mother opened it before she could knock. The older woman's eyes widened at the sight of the luggage, at her daughter's disheveled dress and swollen eyes. "Evelyn, what on earth? Can I stay?" Evelyn's voice cracked, brittle as glass. Her mother stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. Behind her, her father glanced up from the armchair, the newspaper slipping from his hands. His silence weighed heavier than questions. Evelyn hated the way their eyes measured her, as though they already knew more than she wanted to say. She forced a smile, brittle and shallow. "Just a little disagreement with Mark. It'll blow over." Her mother frowned but said nothing. Instead, she motioned to the spare bedroom. Evelyn wheeled her bags inside, closing the door a little too quickly as if shutting out judgment. She sank onto the bed, clutching her phone, scrolling through messages. Nothing from Mark, no explanations, no angry texts, not even a cruel taunt. His silence cut deeper than any insult. The next morning, Mark walked into a law office recommended by Daniel. He carried with him the folder Henderson had prepared, the photographs, the hotel receipts, and the prenuptial agreement Evelyn once laughed off as a formality. The meeting was brief. His lawyer reviewed the file, confirmed the strength of the prenup, and assured him the case would be clean. With the evidence attached, the court would have no hesitation. Mark authorized her to proceed. The petition was filed electronically that same day, stamped, and entered into record. Mark signed the necessary documents without hesitation, his hand steady, his face expressionless. For him, the act wasn't just legal, it was surgical, a final incision cutting away what had already rotted. For 3 days, she kept going back to the house, hoping to see him, all to no avail. Each morning she convinced herself that he might be there, working late, taking a call, stepping out for groceries. Each evening she returned defeated, her footsteps heavy as she retreated down the path. The curtains never moved, the porch stayed silent, and the man who once shared her life might as well have vanished into air. On the second day, she waited longer, leaning against the gate, watching the driveway. Neighbors pretended not to stare as they watered lawns or collected mail, but she caught their sideways glances, their subtle whispers. Shame prickled the back of her neck, yet she stood stubbornly, as though her presence alone might summon him. By the third morning, desperation drove her to his office. She walked in with sunglasses masking swollen eyes, her voice low as she asked the receptionist if Mark was in. The answer was curt, polite, final. "He isn't available today." Evelyn lingered in the lobby for hours, pacing, pretending to scroll her phone. She imagined his footsteps, the sound of his voice, the moment he would finally appear and break the silence. But evening came, the lights dimmed, and she was quietly asked to leave. He had never been there. That night she tried her friends, the same ones who had once laughed with her in restaurants and whispered about better men, richer men, easier lives. Now their voices were clipped, distant. "I'm busy tonight, Evie. Not a good time. We'll talk soon." But no one called back. It was as if she carried a stain they feared might spread to them. In weakness, she dialed her lover's number once more. A woman answered. The voice held no confusion this time, only cold dismissal. "Don't call here again." The line cut, final and merciless. Evelyn dropped the phone onto her bed, staring at it in disbelief. Even he was gone. Her parents' house felt heavier with each passing day. Her father avoided her eyes at breakfast, his newspaper held like a shield. Her mother moved around the kitchen quietly, lips pressed tight. Neither asked questions, but their silence spoke louder than condemnation. Evelyn caught fragments of their late-night conversations through the walls, murmurs of disappointment, of disbelief. She pressed her hands against her ears, wishing for sleep, finding none. By the fourth day, she sat outside the house again, but this time she didn't bother knocking. She only stared at the door, her mind racing with memories of laughter inside those walls, of the man who had once loved her enough to ignore every flaw. She hugged her handbag tightly to her chest, feeling like an intruder at her own home. Her mother stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. Behind her, her father glanced up from the armchair, the newspaper slipping from his hands. His silence weighed heavier than questions. Evelyn hated the way their eyes measured her as though they already knew more than she wanted to say. She forced a smile, brittle and shallow. Just a little disagreement with Mark. It'll blow over. Her mother frowned but said nothing. Instead, she motioned to the spare bedroom. Evelyn wheeled her bags inside, closing the door a little too quickly, as if shutting out judgment. She sank onto the bed, clutching her phone, scrolling through messages. Nothing from Mark. No explanations. No angry texts. Not even a cruel taunt. His silence cut deeper than any insult. On the fifth morning, the air in her parents' house was heavy, the kind that clung to skin and slowed breath. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table in her robe, untouched coffee cooling in front of her. Her phone was silent again. 4 days without a single word from Mark had eroded whatever pride she had left. The doorbell rang. Her mother went to answer. When she returned, she carried 2 thick manila envelopes, her expression clouded with unease. "These are for you," she said softly, setting them on the table. Evelyn's hands hovered over them, trembling. She already knew. She tore the first one open, paper slicing her nail. The heading froze her blood. Petition for divorce. Her name stared back in black ink, paired with marks, cold and official. The prenup was stapled behind it, clauses highlighted, proof she would leave the marriage with nothing. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. She rifled through the pages, searching for some mistake, some loophole. But each paragraph was a wall closing in. Her father had lowered his newspaper, his jaw tightening as he read her face. Her mother's hands were clasped against her chest, eyes dark with disappointment. Before Evelyn could gather words, the second envelope fell open. Photographs slid across the table, glossy and merciless. There she was, laughing at another man's joke, stepping into the Windsor Hotel at night, her hand resting intimately on his arm. A hotel receipt followed, time-stamped, undeniable. Her mother gasped. Her father stood abruptly, chair scraping against tile. Evelyn stared at the images, her stomach twisting, heat rushing to her cheeks. "This isn't..." Her voice cracked. "It's not what it looks like." But the lie collapsed on her tongue. Every page screamed otherwise. Her father's voice was low, hard. "Enough." Evelyn's chest tightened. Tears blurred her vision as she clutched the photos, her body folding in on itself. She had thought she could control the narrative, charm her way back, find allies among friends, or in the arms of another man. But Mark's silence had been a trap, and now the evidence spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Her mother reached for her, but not with comfort, only to pull the photographs away, as if the sight of them was unbearable. Evelyn collapsed onto the table, sobbing, her hands over her face. For the first time since it began, she understood. Mark had not abandoned her in weakness. He had erased her with precision. While she chased shadows of reconciliation, he had prepared a public, legal execution of her pride. The silence that followed was worse than her sobs. Her parents said nothing. The only sound was the faint rustle of paper as her father gathered the documents, his expression unreadable. Evelyn sat broken, the marriage over, the evidence undeniable. And somewhere beyond her reach, Mark remained silent still. "What would you have done if you were in Mark's place?" Leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.